We have seen some incredible matches on stream, and we have one more remaining for you as we find out who our final competitor in Day 2 will be. Will it be Aaron Brok, most notable for running the Dreadnought team at San Diego Regionals and making top 4 before, or Rafa Bagara, who is one of our top trainers from way back when? Really excited to see Rafa on stage and representing Canada in our final win-and-in match.
Canada's always tough to beat here, and he's had quite a resurgence this year. I know he's done pretty well at local, so excited to see both these trainers. Another matchup where I wish they weren't against one another.
It looks like we are going to be taking a look at Aaron's team first, which is pretty close to some of the more standard balance cores that we have been seeing, with the one exception of that Corviknight, which of course our colleague, friend, Lendul really showed off its power as a Landorus incarnate counter. Really can't do much of anything to that Pokemon, but had some interesting wrinkles to this team of the Ogerpon, Hearthflame, Amoonguss, Incineroar, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty big wrinkle in the traditional format. I actually think it's going to be very important in this matchup too, so I hope you're all Corviknight fans. This is an interesting one though too, where it is the bulk up version. You know, sometimes we see things like body press, so it can really only use, can literally only use Brave Bird offensively, which limits it a little bit, but I think it's a really cool set and probably a Pokemon that a lot of trainers aren't prepared for.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense on this team in particular. It patches up that Landorus weakness, patches up a lot of that other those other weaknesses to ground types, which we may be taking a look at in just one moment. But of course, you see the Ogerpon, Incineroar, Amoonguss, Raging Bolt, and even the Urshifu. None of those Pokemon really love staring down the Landorus, so this Corviknight making a lot of sense on Aaron's team. But in order to get into Day 2, Aaron will have to go up against Rafa Bagara, who will be his opponent in this upcoming match. And Rafa does not have the Landorus, but does have another incredibly powerful ground-type force attacker, the Ursaluna.
Yeah, I think probably not too excited to see Corviknight on the other side of the field. I can assume with a team like this that Ursaluna is kind of the core of the offense, and Corviknight's pretty tricky to break through. He certainly has options. That Raging Bolt with a Life Orb, much more an offensive approach to this than we normally see, could be key there. I think also you called out Rafa himself being an old school player. Nice to see a nice old school Pokemon like Cresselia on this side of the field. Nowadays plays a little bit differently than it used to. He's kind of doing the normal thing with safety goggles and Lunar Blessing. The main benefit of that is it's just a huge problem for Amoonguss, where it's immune to Spore itself and can remove sleep from its teammates. There is an Amoonguss on Aaron's team, so there's definitely some give and take in this team matchup.
Yeah, and speaking of Pokemon from the distant past, is Ursaluna evolved from a Teddiursa originally caught from Pokemon Emerald. So this Ursaluna has seen some things and is ready. It actually is going to be pretty excited to see the Corviknight is the bulk up variant without the body press. So but only having Brave Bird means that it won't be able to hit the Ursaluna for super effective damage. And because Rafa is running the Swords Dance variant of Ursaluna, may be able to outpace any kind of defensive boost from that bulk up. But we're going to have to see what happens as we head into Game 1 here. Double Incineroar on the field alongside Corviknight and the Raging Bolt. That Corviknight will, of course, be able to reflect back the Incineroar Intimidate on Rafa's side, getting an double Intimidates onto Rafa's Incineroar, but immediately threatened by that Raging Bolt.
Yeah, I think another critical piece of information, though, is the order those Intimidates happened in. I'm sure Aaron happy to see that as we start out the battle, but yeah, I think this is a smart start for Rafa here. Really can't afford to let this Corviknight get its stats rolling.
Yeah. With the bulk up variant of Corviknight, threatening it with that Raging Bolt immediately is going to be extremely important. Needs to protect that Pokemon as well, because if Rafa has brought the Ursaluna mode in the back, it is one of the only things that can actually tank a hit from that Pokemon. So we'll be bringing that Pokemon back, protecting it by switching in favor of Amoonguss. So Amoonguss out on the field will be able to take this Incineroar Fake Out and not feel too threatened by a Thunderbolt or a Flare Blitz even with the double Intimidate, but instead Rafa targeting down Incineroar on Aaron's side, which has not opted to go for the Fake Out here. Instead, going to take that Thunderbolt, beat the Citrus Berry, and go for the parting shot into that Pokemon, onto the Raging Bolt, and lower the special attack.
I think both sides kind of showing how they got here. Pretty quick turn one there. Rafa not taking the bait and going for the electric type attack into what became the Amoonguss, and the Incineroar also kind of pivoting nicely here, able to bring either of these Pokemon in a more advantageous situation now where the doubly intimidated Incineroar and the parting shot inflicted Raging Bolt there, both having reduced offensive stats now. So with the Amoonguss there too, we talked in the pregame about the bulk up option for Corviknight, but the Ogerpon knows Swords Dance as well, so perhaps going to go through that method instead and not having to deal so much with the type disadvantage against Raging Bolt.
Yeah, this Ogerpon's going to need to get a bunch of Swords Dance though, because as we see all 4 of Aaron's Pokemon, I am not seeing a real answer to this Raging Bolt. You have the Incineroar, you have the Amoonguss, and the Hearthflame Ogerpon, and of course the Corviknight. None of those Pokemon is threatening super effective damage on the Raging Bolt, and in fact are threatening resisted damage except for a knockoff from that Incineroar.
Yeah, I think so too. Be critical, I think, to get rid of this Amoonguss, where even though Cresselia is kind of going to negate its most obnoxious tactics with the spores, it is potentially going to be able to draw some attacks away as we see this Swords Dance. Aaron kind of all-inning quickly on Ogerpon, perhaps, as the sweeper for this game.
Yep, having to get this Ogerpon going, immediately goes for the Swords Dance, takes a U-turn in return. Again, Rafa is running the Assault Vest variant of Incineroar, so does not have the ability to go for Parting Shot, which means that this Ogerpon will be able to potentially get some Swords Dances off and keep ahead of the Intimidates. But Ursaluna switches into a Spore, which means that the Flame Orb will not activate.
That's actually really obnoxious at a lot of levels for Rafa. In theory, it's not such a big deal, right? Well, Cresselia can just remove it. But I think in a lot of other situations, what you probably want to do here is just get the Trick Room off of Cresselia and protect with Ursaluna. But even though you can remove the sleep in the middle of the turn, you still can't use Protect because it has increased priority. So kind of an awkward spot now for Rafa. Has to switch out the Ursaluna, where otherwise probably he wouldn't have had to.
Yep, switching out the Ursaluna, bringing the Incineroar right back in to try and keep this Ogerpon under control. These Intimidates are going to be very important. Again, this is the Assault Vest variant of the Incineroar. It is not Safety Goggles, so is open to being spored by that Amoonguss. Rafa really relying on the Safety Goggles Cresselia to make sure that all of his Pokemon remain awake and at him. But it's just going to be double Incineroar switch in for both Rafa and Aaron, while Aaron goes ahead and terastallizes the Ogerpon to get the attack boost, get the Embody aspect, and completely negate the Incineroar's Intimidate from Rafa, which means this is a +2 Ogerpon able to fire off some Ivy Cudgels now.
It's a really aggressive move, though, removing its resistance to most of Rafa's attackers' offensive moves.
Yeah, no resistance to ground type, no resistance to the electric typing, but who
and no
cares?
Problem.
When you could just pick up KOs like that, +2 Ivy Cudgel with the terastallization boost, really making Cresselia look paper thin right there as Raging Bolt comes back out to try and do some damage control here.
Now, that just didn't happen back in my day, and now this is a really tricky spot, right? You have the Incineroar, who is like relatively safe here, but can't really do anything the other direction either, and yeah, I mean, you've got the sleeping Ursula in the back, or can't activate its orb because it's asleep. Didn't take any sleep turns, so whenever it comes back in, it's going to have to snooze at least for one round. Really looking good for Aaron so far in this match.
Yeah, but Aaron is still going to have to figure out a way through this Raging Bolt, especially with the Hearthflame Ogerpon removing its resistance to Thunderbolt. We'll be able to take some big damage from this Life Orb Raging Bolt. Rafa switching out the Incineroar, has to keep protecting that Pokemon to cycle Intimidates and keep the Ogerpon under control. So brings in the Ursaluna here, but it's just going to take another Ivy Cudgel. Not quite a one-hit KO. Fake Out, of course, brings the flinch to Raging Bolt, but Ursaluna has done nothing. Still winter here, so that bear is asleep.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing, too, is if it wakes up, it's going to faint because the orb is going to activate and knock it out. The plus side is that, at least Raging Bolt didn't take any damage there and does resist Ogerpon's attacks, but you gotta start to wonder now how feasible it is for it to do enough damage, because it does still have to deal with Incineroar and Amoonguss protecting this Ogerpon. Yeah,
and we'll have to be dealing with the Life Orb recoil as well, so all of that chip will start adding up, and Aaron has effectively taken off the big damage from this Ursaluna from the game. Rafa has to retreat Ursaluna to get Intimidates out onto the field to try and keep this Ogerpon under control, but bringing in the Amoonguss will be able to protect the Ogerpon from attacks from the Raging Bolt after this next turn, which means that Aaron will be able to start getting more Swords Dances. Big Thunderclap, though, will deal good damage to that Ogerpon. Not enough to pick up the KO, though, and that might be the last opportunity Rafa gets to target down that Ogerpon, as that Ivy Cudgel is going to be one more to pick up the KO.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is it can use Protect. The bad news is I don't know how it stalls long enough to actually get to hit that Pokemon again. Awful lot of HP to work through on this Amoonguss, and there's still an Incineroar, and even Corviknight at some point, can at least, take an attack for the team and effectively deal 10% damage to this Raging Bolt.
Yeah, and Aaron does not have many good opportunities to hit this Raging Bolt for super effective damage, but who cares when all of Raging Bolt's partners are just going down to this Ogerpon? Aaron will go ahead and retreat that Pokemon to try and preserve it for the future, and brings in his own Incineroar to get another Intimidate off onto Rafa's Incineroar. Has the Amoonguss out on the field, will be able to Spore or Pollen Puff or do any number of things that Amoonguss is known to do. As Rafa brings back in the Ursaluna, which has been on the field multiple times but has yet to take a turn, has yet to take an action, as Aaron also retreating the Amoonguss for Corviknight here. So 3 switches for 3 Pokemon, just the Incineroar on the field for Rafa, which is just going to go for a delayed switch. U-turns their own Ursaluna on the switch-in to go ahead and to protect the Raging Bolt and bring back in the Incineroar for an Intimidate.
This is by far the most complicated way I've ever seen anyone intimidate their own Pokemon.
The Mirror Armor from Corviknight, what would have been a pretty cool play for if the Corviknight was not on the field and had the Ogerpon still out to get more Intimidates off onto that Pokemon. Aaron was able to cover, and instead Incineroar has intimidated itself with that Mirror Armor.
That's kind of just how this game went. Incineroar being a bit of a scaredy cat now with its scaring itself with that Intimidate, and Rafa's got to think about game 2, right? I think the first 3 turns of this game just cannot play out this way, where an uncontested Swords Dance from that Ogerpon is just going to be an L for Rafa if it happens again in this set.
Yeah, and this is something that I've seen happen over and over again with the Assault Vest Incineroar in particular. And this is why, I had run Assault Vest Incineroar before, and why I had moved away from it, is you just can't keep up with some of these other Pokemon if you don't also have Parting Shot. It just becomes too slow to have to switch your Pokemon out and back in to get another Intimidate or attack drop off on your opponents. Instead, you lose a lot of momentum and are unable to actually keep those offensive threats in check. And then you just sort of keep falling behind as you try to switch in and out. That being said, if you get critical hits, you can make a lot of things happen.
Yeah, I was less scared than I thought, I guess. Picking up a big knockout there, yeah.
I'm still an Incineroar, Scott.
Yeah, unfortunately, also going to take a lot of damage for that, and recoil is really going to be the name of the game as this one finishes out. It's starting to look slightly less impossible, but Amoonguss is still a pretty serious problem there. At the very least, if it gets Flare Blitz, that's going to cause Incineroar to knock itself out, and a Raging Bolt with only single target attacks. So going to be very careful about the way it finished this one. Looks like it probably has 4 swings left if it can somehow avoid, maybe 3?
Yeah, 3
big
or
attacks.
4.
Although I can't imagine the world where it gets to do that.
Well, there is a possibility now, Rafa with the Incineroar and Raging Bolt up against the Amoonguss and Incineroar. Notably, there is no opportunity to ever cycle another Intimidate here, so when Ogerpon comes back in, it will have the full Embody Aspect boost. Thunderbolt actually connects onto Incineroar, 12 hit points. Aaron survives. Raging Bolt not able to pick up the KO, and instead will go down to that knockoff, which means that will be it for Rafa in game 1. Has to make some adjustments for game 2, as Aaron is about to go up 1-0 in this set, as Rafa actually picks up another KO, a critical hit with Amoonguss. Incineroar was trying, buddy, but it is not enough. It will knock itself out and give Aaron Brok a 1-0 lead.
That was actually pretty close. I feel like he was 1 crit away, where I think if you get the crit on Incineroar, you wind up with Raging Bolt versus Ogerpon. At worst, you get the mind game of you can hit the thunderclap or not. So slightly spooky at the end for what for a long time felt like a blowout, and we wind up at a strange place as we approach our final game 2 of the day.
Absolutely. Here we go into game 2. And again, the story of that game for me was Ursaluna not getting to do anything. It switched into a big IV Cudgel. It switched into a Spore. It did not get to activate the Flame Orb. Cresselia didn't get to do anything either because that Ogerpon got a free Swords Dance off. The Swords Dance plus the Embody Aspect boost, Incineroar with the Assault Vest, not able to keep up with the boost and to actually control the damage of that Pokemon. And instead, Rafa was just behind and kept taking damage and damage and damage. And even though Aaron doesn't have good options into the Raging Bolt, it didn't matter.
Yeah, honestly, I think if you look at this replay here, you're not going to see Corviknight except on the Pokemon tracker, but I think it was still the MVP of this. Oh, there he is. But I think you're not really going to... I think he was the MVP, right? Because what happened was Rafa realized that he needed to be very careful to control the Corviknight. He led aggressively to deal with the Corviknight, and Aaron just read that and played him, right? Where allowed him to get the free Swords Dance off with the Ogerpon, and he just took over the game, where having to respect the Corviknight kind of just lost him the game. The trick for Rafa here is that you have to get going faster, right? You can't let either of these Pokemon get any stat boosts, and don't totally know what I think the way to make that happen is, but I think that the first 2 to 3 turns of this game are kind of going to be what determines this one. It's a really difficult matchup, I think, for Rafa's side, but he's got to put up a better showing than that, where whether it's Ursaluna doing more or maybe just like immediately committing a Trick Room or something, but he's got to make a play, where I think that one he kind of it was over fast.
Yeah, Trick Room was my immediate thought as well, potentially trying to get the Incineroar and Cresselia out to abuse the fake out pressure and try to get the Trick Room up and bring that Ursaluna up in for free at some point, because really just needed to get some damage, any damage out of that Pokemon to at least offensively threaten the Ogerpon.
Yeah, I kind of wouldn't mind Flutter Mane here either. Its matchup is like kind of bad, but at least it's a threatening immediate damage, right? I think the most important thing on Rafa's side of the field, just not to allow immediate setup. So like maybe there's a path there, but I'll be curious to see what he tries to go for here. And it's combination 2 Pokemon I don't see led too frequently together. Incineroar and Ursaluna facing down rival Incineroar and Corviknight.
Well, this is kind of disastrous for Ursaluna. It gets intimidated. It does not have the Guts boost yet from the Flame Orb, and is immediately threatened with a knockoff from the opposing Incineroar, which could remove the Flame Orb entirely. Makes this an extremely risky lead for the Bear.
Yeah, everything kind of hurts if you're Ursaluna here. We're like, yeah, there's that. There's a, how are you actually going to deal damage to this Corviknight? There's being intimidated. Your friend Cresselia is conspicuously missing. Probably like that Trick Room up facing down a Pokemon that has Tailwind. There's a lot of things that have to happen before this Ursaluna is a happy bear, but it's awake this time, which is better than last game.
It is awake, which is better than last time, as Incineroar on Rafa's side will switch out for the Cresselia, the reliable partner to this Ursaluna, but was not immediately led alongside. All of those things we mentioned force Rafa to protect the Ursaluna this turn, protecting the Flame Orb, making sure the Guts activates, but this means Corviknight gets to bolt up. Again, this does not have the body press tech for super effective damage onto Ursaluna, but this Ursaluna has been intimidated. The Incineroar has switched back out, so it can come back in and keep on intimidating, and Corviknight has Rocky Helmet and the ability to set up more defense boosts. So it is going to be able to wall these Pokemon pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, ish. I mean, I think Amoonguss coming in here might be the best thing for Rafa, where neither of these Pokemon actually care all that much about Amoonguss being around. Again, the path toward actually knocking Corviknight out is a little bit unclear here, but some of the missing pieces have occurred. Okay, Ursaluna's burned now. It can't be knocked off anymore. It's still intimidated. Cresselia is out here to try and perhaps get Trick Room up. You probably could just Swords Dance here if you really wanted to, or you're not exactly being threatened with the knockout the other direction, although Intimidate here would just wipe it out completely.
Yeah, hard to imagine how Aaron stops you from getting a Swords Dance off here, but Looks like it's just going to be that Intimidate to completely remove any attack boost. Ursaluna now at -2, so a Swords Dance would bring it back up to even, and Corviknight continuing to go for bulk ups. So that is both the defense and an attack boost. Well, Rafa does go for that Swords Dance, which means that Ursaluna is back to neutral, but again, staring down a +2 defense Corviknight, and those slower +1 attack boosts will start adding up on the Corviknight. And Aaron does have an opportunity here to continue to do things like cycle fake outs or fake out pressure against Ursaluna, especially as those attack boosts start stacking on Corviknight.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trick for, like, Rafa's game plan here should probably be, okay, I try to knock out all the other 3 Pokemon as quickly as possible, and then at the end, my 4th Pokemon is probably Raging Bolt. I bring that out outside of Trick Room and finish it off. I'm not certain if that's going to be viable or not, but I think at least he's moving toward that path, right? He got the Trick Room. It's sort of an awkward situation, but Incineroar, even though it would have to intimidate itself again, could be helpful here. But no, it's Raging Bolt immediately.
An aggressive switch in for Raging Bolt, trying to make the most of all of these Trick Room turns. Brings in the Raging Bolt, the Dragon and Electric type, to immediately start threatening on that Corviknight. And actually, Rafa going ahead and terastallizing the Ursaluna immediately into the Ghost typing here.
Yeah, trying to avoid a fake out. Knows that probably if turns are limited, the fake out, or the facade rather, doing an incredible amount of damage.
An incredible amount of damage, but not enough for a one-hit KO. And the switch into the Raging Bolt means that Rafa could not go for the Earthquake or else deal massive damage to his partner Pokemon. This Corviknight's Brave Bird will deal so much damage to the Ursaluna, and without Cresselia on the field, there's no way for Ursaluna to heal up, and Cresselia wouldn't even be enough.
Yeah, okay, so it's a slightly awkward situation, but hear me out. Okay, there's, maybe it's not the worst. Ursaluna now threatening a knockout in the Incineroar slot, would move first. Raging Bolt maybe threatening a knockout in Corviknight. That's like temporarily good. Yeah. Fortunately, you know, at some point relatively soon, you're going to need the Cresselia back out here, or Ursaluna's going to be in trouble, but at least they're at somewhat neutral board state now.
Yeah, this is definitely a much more neutral board state, and the Raging Bolt, of course, did lose its Life Orb, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't forget there's no Protect to the Corviknight. You could try to call the Thunderclap versus the Thunderbolt, but Rafa thinks better of it. Get Cresselia out here, desperately try and heal up this poor bear.
Yeah, the bear needs some help. It's going to be the Earthquake to make sure that you pick up the KO on the Incineroar and potentially catch any other Pokemon on the switch in. We'll be able to pick up the KO on Incineroar, but this Corviknight gets to move this turn, and it's going to go for a Roost, which means it's going to heal up all of the damage that it has taken so far from itself.
I mean, that's a problem for tomorrow, you know. Not ideal, but like the Corviknight, at least because of Raging Bolt's present, couldn't attack that turn. Unfortunately, we're going to see the flaw in this strategy, which is Amoonguss, right? And you get the combination of Amoonguss and Corviknight at the same time. You don't have to worry about the Raging Bolt anymore. The safety goggles are on Cresselia, which is helpful in this matchup, but not immediately.
Yeah, well, this is actually kind of a tense position because if Amoonguss comes out and goes down while Trick Room is in effect, really can't do a whole lot to the Ursaluna and the Cresselia. Actually, though, it is carrying Sludge Bomb, which just may deal enough damage to this Ursaluna how weak it is already.
Yeah, I think you probably have to just do the Protect Lunar Blessing here, which probably works against you as much as it does for you. And the Trick Room turns are starting to run out here, right? Only two left. At that point, yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's accomplished enough in this Trick Room.
Yeah, and this Corviknight, again, with +2 attack because of those 2 bulk ups, will still be threatening damage onto the Cresselia as well.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe instead you just let Ursaluna go, like try to go for a Helping Hand facade and just hope that that's enough to get rid of the Amoonguss. Like maybe then at that point you can do enough out of Trick Room to have a chance.
Oh, but this Amoonguss also showing that it has the Ghost Terra typing. An incredibly rogue Terra type from the Amoonguss will protect itself from a facade coming out from the Ursaluna.
Okay, that could be bad.
Yeah, so the helping hand facade not looking so good anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Don't do that one.
That's the wrong play. Ghost Mushroom on the field now. Amoongus is immune to normal type attacks. The helping hand comes out from the Cresselia onto the Ursaluna, but the Sludge Bomb first into Cresselia, trying to get the poison, and does get a poison onto Cresselia. That will tick unless Cresselia is able to get a Lunar Blessing off, and the facade into the Amoongus. No damage. Corviknight with a Brave Bird deals a lot of damage back to the Cresselia as well, and with the poison tick means that Cresselia is on the verge of going down as well.
Oh no, I think that might have been Raphael's last chance. I think he almost had to go for it there where, in retrospect, yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to Ghost Terror there, but he needed a big knockout, and Ursaluna, unfortunately, not able to deliver. Really tough spot now where even, Lunar Blessing is not going to help much. I think it's probably also impossible where I think Amoongus can just knock Cresselia out because of the poison the previous turn.
Right.
Fire a Brave Bird in the Ursaluna slot, and Raphael's gonna have to get real creative now.
Yeah, well, this Pollen Puff from Amoongus picking up the big KOs. That's why it was my #1 caster choice. Amoongus going on the offensive here. Cresselia will go down. Ursaluna gets to fire off an Earthquake, but Corviknight not affected by it because for the time being, it is still a flying type. Immediately after the Earthquake goes off, Corviknight will land and heal up its HP as Ursaluna has one more tick of burn before it goes down. And now here comes Raging Bolt to try and make a miracle happen, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think one of the important problems with this is you now have two Pokemon who are weak against ground type attacks on your team. So you can't facade the poor Amoongus, and now you can't Earthquake either. I feel like you kind of, I guess you have to switch Ursaluna out, and I hope you can Earthquake later somehow. But yeah, the phase between now and then is highly unclear.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to be, I mean, again, this Corviknight has just gotten so much value out of those two bulk ups. It is still probably threatening decent damage onto that Raging Bolt, and this Ursaluna will go down after this turn unless it switches. So Aaron doesn't have to worry about that Ursaluna. The Ghost Terra typing on the Amoongus and the Flying typing and Steel typing on Corviknight are doing the work for him.
As Corviknight's had a heck of a game despite not doing much. Finally taking down its nemesis here. The two of them stared at each other for 5 turns, and things are looking very good for Aaron, who's just played a great set with a positive matchup here.
Yeah, and absolutely no Rage Powders coming out from the Amoongus means that Corviknight dodges a Thunderclap but gets knocked out by the Thunderbolt here from the Raging Bolt, which will go to sleep due to a Spore, which means that it's going to be Aaron's final Pokemon and Amoongus up against the Raging Bolt and the Incineroar coming in now. Ooh, and it's Hearthflame Ogerpon in the back.
Yeah, it suddenly doesn't look that impossible anymore. I mean, it's still bad, right? But
not great, but not impossible.
Yeah, which, I mean,
that's something.
Yeah. I mean, once again, right? Amoongus is going to take a lot of damage from a Thunderbolt if it has to eat one. Unlike Corviknight, this Ogerpon actually is intimidated, and all jokes aside, if somehow this Raging Bolt maybe gets a quick wake up. Yeah, Incineroar picked up a knockout here. You can see it.
Ogerpon gets to +1 with that Swords Dance. Raging Bolt is still asleep, and this Ghost-type Amoongus is vulnerable to this knockoff from Incineroar. Picks up the KO, knocks off the Mental Herb, which means that Aaron now is playing a sleep game here. Incineroar and the Raging Bolt. We saw how much damage Ivy Cudgel was doing to Raging Bolt, but let's not forget that was with the Terrestrialization and that +2. So that's a one-turn sleep, connects a Dragon Pulse into the Ogerpon, deals about 50% damage as Incineroar fires back a Flare Blitz in return and picks up the KO. It wasn't impossible. Rafa knew all along. Game 3, winning in for day 2.
All right, we got to wake up with Raging Bolt now, everybody. We got a match here.
we got a game.
Yeah, pretty exciting finish there. I think the thing to kind of keep in mind there is, the attacking with Corviknight, probably not the play there, where gave up too much, but
yeah, at least attacking and not protecting it with the Amoongus.
Yeah, a little greedy. I think Aaron perhaps also lulled to sleep there with what was a very advantageous matchup, and all the props in the world to Rafa there. That was looking real bad, and he was able to play himself in a position where at least he had a chance to win the game, was able to do it, and
found it.
Yeah. I mean, it was it's a strange one where I feel like the Rage Powder there makes that very different, but without it, we're looking into Game 3 and another opportunity for perhaps Rafa to get a little better position earlier in the game.
Absolutely. Rafa was able to start getting more damage off from that Ursaluna, but then in Trick Room, the Ghost type Among Us was able to start stalling things out, and this Corviknight was rolling, got 2 bulk ups, +2 attack, +2 defense, and got multiple intimidates off onto the enemy Ursaluna, which meant that all of these attacks that were dealing good chunks of damage were not dealing the maximum amount of damage. Rafa even spent a turn to get a Swords Dance up, but that just brought Rafa's Ursaluna back to neutral instead of +1 or +2, which is what you would love to see alongside the Guts boost. And then the Ghost Terra typing proved to be sort of, the monkey paw curls. I can dodge facades now, but then I get knocked out by the knockoff. And, there were no, because the Terra got used early, there were no guessing games of, will this Incineroar go for Flare Blitz or knockoff? Which one will it be? And was able to find that window, find that opening, knock off the Mental Herb, get the attack into the Corviknight, and then survive these Ivy Cudgels. 1 turn sleep did not hurt at all, but still probably Rafa put himself in a pretty decent position to get his way back into that game.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to get at least a second Flare Blitz anyway, right?
Yeah.
Where I don't know that the wake up mattered all that much. I mean, maybe a max turn sleep is enough, but
yeah.
I mean, the Corviknight turn is the difference maker in that one. And yeah, I mean, I'm a little puzzled where it just seemed like that was such a big advantage that it should have been over. And I think Aaron's got to reset here. I think he still has a very advantageous matchup in this one. It just, it gotta show some poise, right? Rafa opting to lead, actually both players opting to lead the same way they did the second game. So perhaps feeling like both of them feel like, all right, if I just play a good, smart game, I can do this one.
Yeah, there are other opportunities here. Rafa, of course, probably feeling pretty good about finding the win condition in that game too. And like you mentioned, Aaron has to lock in here. This is the final game of the day. The winner of this game will advance into day 2, and the loser will have to end their tournament run earlier than either of these players would expect to.
Yeah, I think I like taking some time here. I think probably, Aaron maybe get a little ahead of himself in that last match, and this is one he definitely can take. I think building up those bulk ups again early is big. It just, he's got to be a little bit more careful with the Corviknight here, where it is so important. It's great against the majority of Rafa's team. The fake out this time going to prevent anything crazy from happening. Perhaps it's just a free Swords Dance for the Ursaluna.
Well, the fake out connects on to the Corviknight, means that Corviknight doesn't get a chance to bulk up, but Aaron actually goes for the knockoff onto Ursaluna, will knock off the Flame Orb. That is not a free Swords Dance. Rafa, though, will be able to get a Swords Dance off, but that losing the Guts ability on Ursaluna is huge. That is a huge reduction in Ursaluna's attack power, and also opens it up to being abused by the Among Us in Trick Room.
Yeah, I think, it puts an interesting spot, right, where it does to an extent, but I think if the long-term plan is to get Cresselia out in the field, maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, Cresselia still mostly negates it, and again, all Rafa needs to do is to knock out the other 3 Pokemon and let Raging Bolt close the game.
Well, we're going to see a third Pokemon here as Parting Shot connects onto the Ursaluna. So Aaron is investing a lot in keeping this Ursaluna under control, going to make sure that it does not have access to the Guts ability, and it's going to be dropping the attack of that Swords Dance by using the Parting Shot. Got a sneak peek of the final Pokemon, Aaron making some adjustments here, but that Raging Bolt is not going to love seeing Earthquakes coming out from the Ursaluna. This Among Us, however, it will happily take a U-turn from Rafa's Incineroar. And now Rafa gets to choose what Pokemon will come in. You have to imagine seeing the Among Us, it's going to be the reliable partner, Cresselia, coming out.
Yeah, sort of an awkward turn order here, though. We'll see another Swords Dance for this Ursaluna. Gonna get its attack boost one way or another.
Yeah, this is kind of a mirror of Game 1, where the Hearthflame Ogerpon on Aaron's side was able to start getting Swords Dances off, and Rafa wasn't able to control it because only having the Assault Vest meant that you would only get intimidates every other turn, versus Aaron has access to Parting Shot, which instead of now being at +4, it's now at +3, which is still scary.
Yeah, sort of an interesting position now, though, because I assume on Rafa's side, maybe if you want it, you can go for the Protect Trick Room, get the turn order back in the right order for you. You're still Earthquaking against the Flying-type Pokemon, but maybe you can pick up the Among Us and start moving from there.
Yeah, and actually no access to Facade here means there is no real reason to worry to terrestrialize the Amoonguss. Instead, it's going to switch it right back out and try to keep the Ursaluna under control. That's another Intimidate connecting with Ursaluna. But these Swords Dances are really powerful, and Ursaluna, like we mentioned, has no incentive to go for Facade because there is no burn, which means you are switching in a Fire type into a potential Earthquake from this Ursaluna. Brave Bird not enough to pick up the KO, and no residual damage coming out from the burn means that this Ursaluna is a little bit more healthy than usual, and the Helping Hand plus the Swords Dance plus the Earthquake on the Incineroar and the switch, and that is a one-hit KO. Rafa's Ursaluna has woken up.
Yeah, I mean, no Flame Orb, no problem yet. A big knockout there. We've seen kind of the effectiveness of all the cycling, and Ursaluna is still in a position where it doesn't need to knock out every Pokemon of the team, right? Potentially looking pretty scary now. We're no longer able to be intimidated, and with the roster of Pokemon available, it's still pretty challenging to stop Ursaluna from maybe getting one more knockout, right? It's hard to get both. But you could, again, now that the Protect Trick Room play is still available, and then what does Corviknight's partner do while Ursaluna tries to take out that other Pokemon?
Yeah, well, Ursaluna is still in range of a Brave Bird from Corviknight. That's always a possibility. And of course, Trick Room is a little bit less optimal for Rafa because the Flame Orb has been knocked off, which means there is no burn to prevent Spore. Which means if you do set up the Trick Room, Ursaluna would have to potentially waste a turn by being put to sleep, even with the Lunar Blessing. Would happen after the turn. Could be a little bit awkward, but here's a big Brave Bird to pick up the KO. Rafa just sacrificing Ursaluna here to the altar of Corviknight. Another Brave Bird connecting. Will pick up that KO. Cresselia goes for a Lunar Blessing, but there's nothing there. Hoping to maybe catch Aaron going for a Roost or another Bulk Up or another Switch, and another Poison from Sludge Bomb. Aaron's Amoonguss is trying to limit the effectiveness of this Cresselia. Something fierce.
Yeah, I mean, that damage matters too, right? Where even if there isn't like a double target in this slot next turn, which seems very unlikely now that Raging Bolt has come out in the field, that damage is still going to chip away on the Cresselia potentially. It's fairly likely we will see a Brave Bird into that slot, and it's still going to add up where Cresselia probably only has a couple turns left, and I don't know if this Raging Bolt is going to be able to take down the Amoonguss fast enough, but sort of a fun exchange where which support Pokemon can enable their partner here the best.
Well, here we are again in the same kind of situation as Game 2, where Amoonguss is able to protect Corviknight from Raging Bolt with the Rage Powder ability. But, we saw in Game 2 that Aaron was incredibly willing to just let Corviknight be open to a Thunderbolt.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a chance at it again, although with the Roost here, not likely to be a one-hit KO even if he calls it.
The Roost at least removing the flying typing, which means that this Amoonguss is just taking a critical hit Dragon Pulse. That's a lot of damage, and we know it's a mental herb, so will not actually be able to heal up any of that damage unless it switches out. Cresselia will go for Trick Room here, so making sure to switch the dimensions for these next 5 turns. As we have now the Raging Bolt being, the Amoonguss being the fastest thing on the field, then likely the Raging Bolt and likely the Cresselia and Corviknight.
I mean, I think Rafa's really close to finding the window here, right? Really, it doesn't matter now that Amoonguss is slower than Raging Bolt because it's not going to knock it out, and a Lunar Blessing would enable Raging Bolt to wake up before it moves anyway, where the turn order is just so important for Cresselia against Amoonguss, and it's set up now in a way where Rafa is likely to gain a Pokemon advantage here.
Yeah, Rafa is finding ways to poke holes in Aaron's team here. It's going to be the terrestrialization coming out from that Corviknight. So Aaron, we have been seeing way more Fire-type Terra in these last couple of games than I ever expected to. But that's a Fire-type Corviknight on the field now. So no longer weak to a Thunderbolt from the Raging Bolt. Another Pollen Puff into Cresselia, not enough to pick up the KO here, but Cresselia able to get a Lunar Blessing off to heal itself up, cover for any spores against the Raging Bolt, and also heal up a little bit of the Life Orb recoil damage that Raging Bolt has taken. There's a Thunderbolt into the Corviknight. That terrestrialization not enough to pick up the KO, but that is still about 75% damage. This Brave Bird into Cresselia. Cresselia hangs on with 1 or 2 hit points. Recoil not enough to knock out the Corviknight as well, but this Cresselia is hanging on by the skin of its teeth.
Oh, that's so pivotal, though. I mean, like, it really changes things. Right? I think there would have been advantages and disadvantages to both players if that knockout occurs. Yeah. Incineroar doesn't get its free switch. Instead, now Cresselia being threatened by potential knockout for this Amoonguss, but if it goes for that option, then Raging Bolt can pick up a knockout in either of these Pokemon as well. A really tricky turn for both of these players, as could easily throw the tournament away. Remember, this is game 3. Both players are 6-2. A wrong decision here is going to knock one of these players out of a tournament. Absolutely incredibly tense turn.
Our players have played 8 rounds of best of 3 Pokemon, all coming down to this decision on this turn of game 3. Aaron has opted to go for a Spore onto Raging Bolt, which puts Raging Bolt to sleep, but Cresselia goes for the Lunar Blessing. Cresselia is sticking around. It will heal itself. It will also wake Raging Bolt up. That means that this Raging Bolt gets to fire off an attack onto either one of these Pokemon, goes for the Dragon Pulse into the Amoonguss that will pick up the KO on Amoonguss, and now Corviknight has the opportunity to deal some damage back. It has had multiple bulk ups, but it was not able to pick up the KO on Cresselia last time, but this time it does. Aaron finally knocks that Pokemon out, which means Rafa is down to his final 2 Pokemon, Assault Vest, Incineroar, and now the final Pokemon is revealed from Aaron Brok. It is Assault Vest Raging Bolt.
And just 6 HP remaining for that Corviknight. Much simpler game if that is a knockout. Instead, Raging Bolt is going to need to try to find a way to pick up this knockout. Also, because Corviknight was able to survive, able to reflect that Intimidate back to the Incineroar, was already going to struggle to deal too much damage to this Raging Bolt, and a really interesting spot. You'd assume the Raging Bolt on Rafa's side is slower, giving the respective team compositions, and it's really an interesting spot now. Do you maybe go for perhaps like a cheeky knockoff from Incineroar onto the opposing Raging Bolt to get rid of that Assault Vest, maybe?
It's definitely an option, but instead going for the fake out onto Raging Bolt. Of course, Raging Bolt on Aaron's side unable to protect, so Rafa going for perhaps the safer play there just to get the Corviknight off the field. Say, hey, let's all take a moment, let's step back, let's breathe. You don't move, I'm getting the Corviknight off the field, and now we can have, a nice, civilized Incineroar Raging Bolt versus Raging Bolt.
And there's still more Trick Room remaining, so I think probably we see that turn now. Rafa just absolutely seemed like he was buried in this set, but could he be taking this one?
Oh, the knockoff knocks off the Assault Vest. This is a Dragon Pulse from a Life Orb Raging Bolt. Lost the Assault Vest, picks up the KO! Rafa, hometown hero! Raphael Bagara will advance to day 2, 2-1 over Aaron Brok in one of the tightest, most exciting best of 3 matches of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you have to respect his determination, right? It looked so bad till about halfway through game 2. I think even then, it just seemed like it was such a tough spot, but he didn't give up in the game. He kept pulling all the advantages back he could, and was able to get in a position where, he had one big turn in that second game to be able to turn things around, and then I think in that third game, with it more neutral again, he was able to keep a good enough position, able to pull that victory in. Oh man, I just really respect it too. He really shows what he's learned for years of competing, where it would have been so easy to kind of just throw in the towel, I think, in that set. But,
absolutely.
Wow, what an impressive performance.
Wow, we were truly blessed with 2 incredible matches here in round 9, and congratulations to Raphael Bagara and to Raghav Malavia for making it into day 2 off of those 2 impressive victories. This game 3 was incredible. Entirely different from both of the games came before. Ursaluna was able to start getting those Swords Dances off, did lose the Flame Orb, crucially, so was not able to get access to Facade for the biggest possible damage, and this Corviknight was coming so close to dealing the crucial damage that it needed to pick up KOs onto both the Cresselia and the Ursaluna, but wasn't quite able to close the deal and finish it off. But you know who could? Ursaluna with those Earthquakes.
And really seeing Ursaluna's power here, right? Where despite not having that Flame Orb, kind of the whole thing the moveset's built around, able to pick up that big knockout with the help of the helping hand from Cresselia, and then Amoonguss doing its best there to battle back, getting its second first Sludge Bomb Poison of the set, but wasn't enough. Nice critical hit there. I don't know how much that one mattered, but yeah, it was so tight the whole way through. Corviknight just firing Bravebird after
so
Bravebird,
close.
but Cresselia hanging on, trained with trust and love there, and able to help close this one out. You see the power of Lunar Blessing. Cresselia, that unique move. Really strong against the opposing Amoonguss, and I know you predicted it because Amoonguss is so powerful, but the most direct counter in the game perhaps to Amoonguss's tricks there.
Yeah, the safety goggles, Cresselia with Lunar Blessing, basically shutting down Amoonguss, which is an important addition to this team. People think about Cresselia and Ursaluna as partners just because of Levitate and the ability to dodge earthquakes, but also being able to protect Amoonguss, protect your team, the rest of your Pokemon from Amoonguss is a critical part of that as well, and we saw how important that was. Rafa deserved pop-off there as he is headed to day 2.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. Obviously, I gave up on game 2 a little bit too quickly there, and I'm really glad he didn't. Like I said, I think a lot of players kind of would have just realized this is a ridiculous deficit, right? Like, this is probably not going to happen. And yeah, I mean, if you want to win tournaments, you can't give up on sets, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just so important. Like, okay, well, the best thing I can do is play to my outs here, right? Even if the odds aren't in my favor, I need to do everything I can either to give my opponent a chance to make a mistake, or maybe I get a roll in my favor. He kept himself in it. I think he was definitely like one bad trade away from losing the game, and it just never happened. Especially at the end of a long day like this.
Yeah.
I think even the TCG tournament is closing down around us. Really impressive run by him.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's worth noting that Aaron was pretty close to taking that game 3 as well. If we were maybe one turn further into Trick Room, Aaron had more outs there, and just that game, that whole set was so close throughout it, and major props to Rafa for finding the win condition in that game too. You're right, I was over here like, all right, here we go, 2-0, let's go get some dinner, but then Rafa found the win condition, managed to sneak a Thunderbolt through Amoonguss into the Corviknight, and took control of game 2, and then it seemed like Rafa just had Aaron in his sights, was ready for it. It all came down to some really tense decisions in that game 3, and it was Rafa who still had the stamina, still had the energy to make those calls.
Yeah, as Raging Bull, who had that good eat and kept finding those holes, got those clutch knockouts, and wow, what a set that turned out to be.
All right, well, let's go ahead and toss it down to Gabby to hear from the man himself, Raphael Bagara, who is our newest addition to the Day 2 squad.
Thank you so much, Evan. Rafa, congratulations on your win. Congratulations on making day 2. How does it feel?
It feels amazing. This regional means a lot to me just because it's my hometown. So, it feels good to represent, so.
Yeah, and represent you did. I mean, that was such a crazy set. It felt like every game was very close. I want to go back to game number 1. When you saw the lead, when you saw the Corviknight, what were you thinking?
I was okay facing off against Corviknight just because I know that my Raging Bolt pins it, and if he tears out of the electric weakness, that means I can Earthquake it with Ursaluna. So there wasn't like one specific Pokemon that I was afraid of. It was just a matter of getting all my Pokemon into position.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was a little bit of a struggle to get that positioning. And in game number 2, it got really close at the end. Raging Bolt waking up in the nick of time. Were you nervous at that point? Did you think that, oh man, maybe it just wasn't going to work out?
I mean, in that position, I thought I had the game won anyway, just because he couldn't break through the Incineroar, and that could 2-hit KO with Flare Blitz. But I mean, yeah, it was. At that point, I thought it was fine. But before that position, I thought I might have lost. I just had to play out. So.
Why did you decide to lead the same lead all 3 games?
I switched it up games 2 and 3 just because
right.
In game 1, he caught my Ursaluna coming in and he spored that slot, which made it really difficult to actually make progress. So in games 2 and 3, I wanted to lead it even in the face of Corviknight just because I knew I needed to get my Flame Orb activated right away.
Yeah, and when I think it was game 3 as well, you lost the Flame Orb pretty early on. Did that worry you at all?
Yeah, it was terrible just because he could spore my Ursaluna and it means I don't get my boost. And like he led the same thing in game 2 and he made a different play then, so I thought I was safe to just Sword Stance, but he made a good adjustment.
Nice. Well, now that you're locked into day 2, what's your plan for tonight? Are you gonna practice, study?
I'm just gonna go to bed. It's been a long day, I'm tired, so get dinner and go to bed.
Yeah, I know. It's been a very long day, so we won't keep you here for too long. Do you have any shout-outs you want to give?
Shout out to Tub, shout out to PNW. I'll have more for tomorrow, so thank you.
All right, well, sounds good. Have a great night, Rafa. Thank you so much for joining us, and casters, right back to you.
All right, thank you.